Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we are talking about episode 1 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier with myself, Matthew Fox, and Paul Hoppe. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm Matthew. I'm your host. We were not planning to do episodes about this show. I think somehow, now looking back on it, if you told me that there's a TV show in which the Marvel Universe is going to explore questions around the mantle of a hero being passed to another, issues of the interaction of heroes with the military, political questions around the blip and around the validity of borders or of breaking down borders, questions around trauma and healing and redemption and forgiveness, and just everything about this show, I would, of course, told you we're going to record on it. So I got through the episode and I just texted Paul immediately and was like, so we're recording on this? The plan is that maybe we're going to do a quick little episode, 20 minutes, 25 minutes each week. We might do it for every episode. We might only do it this week. We'll find out. But for now, Paul, what did you think of this episode?
I enjoyed it a lot. It raised a lot of interesting questions, and I'm fairly confident that by the end of the last episode of this season, I will either love or hate the show.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Like, there's just not going to be much middle ground, right?
I think a lot of that has to do with how brave they're going to be exploring some of the questions they are, you know?
Absolutely.
Until now, the MCU has been fairly non-political on some regards. They've made a lot of political points, but they've often done it in fairly subtle ways where, like, you know, you can come out of some of the Iron Man movies and think, that is a searing indictment of the military-industrial complex and the role of weapons manufacturers in it. You can also come out of Iron Man going, wow, that was a cool suit, he kicked ass, and not thinking about much more.
Yes.
This one, it seems they're being a lot more upfront about the politics.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the first time I remember, like, race being overtly an issue in the MCU.
Yeah.
I might have missed something.
But Black Panther and Luke Cage dealt with it quite a lot, but
yeah, true.
But certainly not in something that wasn't specifically coded around those issues.
Right, exactly. It's like just going to the bank to getting a loan, like in everyday society, basically.
Yeah. And I just want to say, there's two main topics we're going to get into, but just because you mentioned it, that scene is one of the best examples I've seen on television, in any kind of show, of subtle racism. You know, of where, like, I think if you asked that banker, he'd say, oh, I don't have a racist bone in my body. But that action of a white person viewing a black celebrity as, oh, yeah, this is awesome, this is cool. Oh, by the way, I'm going to deny your loan, but now can I get a selfie? Like, the utter lack of empathy that Sam as a person might really be feeling kind of mad that his loan got rejected, but that he might not want you to, at that moment, be the celebrity so you can take a picture with him. The fact that doesn't even occur to the banker, it's like that's how racism works. Yeah,
and it's, you know, it's the intersection of racism and capitalism as well, right?
Exactly.
So
let's talk specifically about Sam, and because I think that was the first thing we really wanted to get into is, like, I love the character of Bucky. His struggles are mostly internal, and we'll get to that, I think, on later episodes. But with Sam, I mean, first of all, in the very first scene, we find out one of the very first scenes, he's working for the military, but it's unofficial. What were you thinking when you heard that?
I mean, I wasn't originally thinking of Michael Weston, but you know, the idea of
Michael Weston, the star of Burn Notice, this show all about a CIA spy who gets burned, but is kind of official at later points, and etc.
Right. It wasn't a CIA spy. Technically, he was you know, the whole idea of private contractors who work for government agencies, I think, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
But
it's Halliburton,
you know,
it's Blackwater.
Exactly. And it's like, you know, we see Sam as a hero, I think rightly so, throughout, I'd say, all of his appearances.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can question siding with Cap in Civil War. You could say, oh, well, Tony was right or whatever. But, like, you know, I think he's very clearly motivated by a drive to try and do what he thinks is right. And, you know, he's willing to follow others in terms of being like, okay, well, you know, if they're the one that thinks this is right, then I'm willing to kind of throw in with them, right? thrown with the people that he trusts. And I mean, to me, this show feels like it's about, is he going to be the one who decides, okay, now I'm going to try and decide completely on my own what I think is the right thing to do, and then maybe I'm even going to lead people, right? Like, I mean, if he does take up the mantle of Captain America, like, is he going to lead the Avengers? I don't know.
Right. Who are the Avengers right now? I mean, that's a very open question. Like, Wanda's off doing her thing, White Vision, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who I just want to refer to as Vision.
Yeah.
I think they talked that one out, but yeah, it you know, I feel like the question was kind of raised as to, you know, okay, Sam's clearly working for the military, but he's also not like enlisted, as far as I can tell, right? He's a private contractor, so that's its kind of own brand of diciness, I think. Like, to me, it's sort of a little more comfortable from his perspective, because if there's a mission that he's really like, oh, hell no, like, he could just be like, no, I'm not taking that gig, I guess. But on the other hand, it's like there's, you know, in terms of accountability, you know, there's a lot of questions there. And beyond that, there's just like, what's the U.S. military doing in Tunisia? But then, like, they can't go into Algeria, and I mean, Libya, right. No, the reason I said Algeria is because I saw somewhere where it was saying that Batroc was Algerian, although I thought he was a Basque national separatist or whatever. But Batroc being the guy he fights in that intro scene, who was in Captain America Winter Soldier, which was the first film where Sam appeared. Both of
which involve Cap or Sam jumping out of an airplane without a parachute to go fight Batroc, which is also kind of cool.
Exactly. Like, total callback, right? Total callback. And I loved that whole scene in terms of just, like, the action. I thought was really good. It went on maybe a little longer than I needed it to. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, oh, they're definitely front-loading this with action, so we sit around patiently listening to people talking for most of the rest of the episode.
I definitely had a few moments watching him chase those, like, people on the flying rafts, I think is the best way I can describe them.
Right, yeah.
They were going through all those, like, tight canyons and twisting and turning.
Yeah.
I kept waiting for one of them to hit one of the walls and explode, TIE Fighter style.
Right,
like,
totally.
I've seen that chase scene in Star Wars so many times.
I know. It was very, very reminiscent of a Star Wars, like, planetary.
I'm so glad you brought up the thing about the border, because I think that's such an interesting thing to... Like, I feel like Sam's whole story and the Flag Smashers were really dealing with nationalism and with internationalism. Because, like, I hadn't even put it together until you mentioned it here, but the Flag Smashers' whole idea is that they think that borders are dumb and they want to get rid of all the borders. And we started out the show by Sam having this thing of, like, we're chasing who is, in theory, a dangerous, bad person, but we're coming up to this completely arbitrary, invisible line in the sand that you're also, like, flying, 3,000 feet above, but that line in the sand is so important that you have to do this crazy maneuver to kill the guy or stop the guy before you get over to it, or else literally this American citizen gets kidnapped and you can't, like, fly 10 more feet or 1 more mile.
Right.
And I hadn't even realized that now, but, like, I really like that we're being introduced to this group called the Flag Smashers who want to smash borders, and we start out by showing just how dumb and arbitrary borders can be. Like, that can't be a coincidence.
Right, for sure. No, and I mean, Batroc even says, like, oh, if we cross the border, he won't follow us, like, almost like kind of thinking this sort of mocking, like, he's recognizing that it's this silly line in the sand, or in this case, like, a line in the sky.
Right.
And that they're beholden to it. And, like, yeah, on the one hand, like, I totally think national borders are ridiculous, but at the same time, I also think that the U.S. military going around and totally ignoring them, while being like, oh, no, you can't cross our border,
right? But
we don't care about your borders, is also, is equally ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I really hope the Flag Smashers are, like, some kind of, like, more relatable than just, like, they have one thing to say about the world that I totally agree with.
Right.
And then they're just, like, villains, like, generic villains. Like, please don't do that.
Well, and one thing I know, I haven't read the comics, so I don't know the details, but I know that apparently there's a character in the comic books called Flag Smasher. And so my guess is that person we saw, who seemed to have like, superhuman strength in terms of how far they threw Torres across that street, I'm guessing that is like, the group is the Flag Smashers or maybe something else, but that is going to be the person Flag Smasher. And I agree with you. I really don't want that character to be a generic villain.
Yeah. I'm not sure that physical person is going to be that character. I've seen other spoilery stuff elsewhere, but that's certainly a possibility. But yeah, totally. Like, please make this a real person with interesting motivations and not just like a generic villain with a name that I like kind of agree with, but maybe most people don't,
My hope is that either, like, I would love it if they turn out to be not really antagonists, like that at some point there's a team up moment, and someone pointed out that actually they pointed this out on the MCU cast that, I mean, what do we see them do? They rob a bank and like punch a couple of people. We don't see them doing anything nefarious. I mean,
they're not killing a bunch of people.
Right. I mean, Falcon has a much higher body count. Like, there's none of the earlier like, I'm going to try and help without killing people. Like, the Red Wing has a high body count. I mean,
right. Yeah, drone strikes orchestrated by Falcon. It's all of Red Wing's kills.
But if they're going to be the antagonist, I at least hope that they get to be a Killmonger type villain, where they have a very legitimate point. And at some point, like, I think it's guaranteed that at some point Sam is going to break away from the military and basically be like, I'm not going to be a United States puppet, and that it's wrong to have any Cap figure as United States puppet. And so I'm hoping that either he teams up with Flag Smasher, or that they somehow that he has that kind of T'Challa moment of, I don't agree with your methods, I'm going to stop your evil plan, but you convinced me about your goals, and now my goals are going to be the kind of thing you were fighting for.
Right, and I'm going to try and carry them through in a way that I think is, more sensible and reasonable and less violent.
Right.
Yeah.
So with it,
go
ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, that's kind of my hope for the show, right? Like, I doubt that there will be too much of a team up. If there is, I think that could be awesome. But I definitely don't feel like, Sam is going to team up with this faux Captain America, fellow for a long time, and like just be like, oh yeah, let's just stop the Flag Smashers. Like, it doesn't feel like that kind of show to me.
Which, by the way, am I right that we now have a TV show that is part of the like most revenue inducing franchise that is American based, where it seems a central premise is calling out the American government and military for overt nationalism? Like, did I miss something, or we get like talk about political?
So yeah, and this is where some of my concern is. First of all, I think didn't you say, isn't Star Trek actually the highest grossing? But whatever, that's not.
I think it has the most episodes, but it's never gotten the same kind of revenue.
Oh, okay.
Like, it was always on smaller channels.
Oh, it's just in terms of total episodes. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, my concern is that like I'm pretty sure the military funds a lot of, not funds, but contributes economically to a lot of Marvel projects.
Very much so.
Right?
All the Iron Man movies, Air Force was connected to Captain Marvel. It's definitely been a thing and a problem.
Yeah, and so I'm sure that it's connected here. Particularly, I saw someone commenting in the Stranded Panda chat about recognizing the gunships and being like, oh, I was involved with those, right? And so, like, in order to actually get your hands on, like, real military vehicles, like, I think generally companies work with the military. And so it's like, well, how deep can you cut if you're kind of, like, financially in bed with these companies, Like, I don't expect, Shang-Chi to, like, really be too critical of, the government of China,
right?
Even if like like that would be a hero I would be really interested in seeing, right? Like, as opposed to just being like going up against criminals. It's like, I mean, personally, like if I were just to like make a superhero universe, like most of my superheroes would be taking down governments and trying to reform them in ways that they were actually representative of the people rather than, not like Superman Red Son, but,
right.
But basically using their might to remove the sort of the instruments of oppression and then be like, okay, now you're actually all going to get to vote. They're actually all going to get counted. And, but like, that's not what we're going to see. Right. I mean, these things are definitely, they're entangled. And so I'm very happy to see that they are touching on a lot of these issues. And it feels like there's some level of direct confrontation, but I'm a little bit skeptical that they'll really, dig as deep as I would like them to.
And I mean, there is an established history in the comics, but also in the MCU of Captain America being like, and there's a great video you and I just watched about this, that Captain America is the representation of the idealized version of America, but that a lot of times the thing he's fighting against is the actual American government or the problems of the actual American populace that is not living up to those ideals. And this is, I mean, going back to the first movie that he was in, Captain America: The First Avenger, like his big mission involves directly disobeying orders from his, superior officer and going off on his own. So yeah, I think there could be a very interesting. In some ways, I feel like we're supposed to think that this is like the American government specifically choosing who the Captain America will be, and that this is a like, like they specifically said, the world needs heroes, but America needs a hero, and that's who this person is. I think we're very much set up to be like that's not what Captain America should be, and. In the past, it's always been, but it was Hydra. It wasn't the American government. I'm going to be so pissed if this is Hydra again. Like, I really want it to be like the actual American government is doing these things. And they can still be like, it's a cartoon, it's a comic book world. We're not saying this is like the real world. This is the MCU. But I would love that. I'd love if we dived into what is it about American nationalism that makes us think like, yes, rah, we need the Captain America figure to defend us and all this stuff. I think you're right. I think there's a level of it being like, like I want there to be a, blonde, idiotic, doesn't understand anything that's going on, orange-skinned president in this who's doing all the dumb things about nationalism. We're not going to get that direct, but...
Right, yeah. And that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kidding.
I've seen enough orange faces.
I'm kidding about that. I don't really want that,
but... No, I know.
But yeah, I would love to see. I'm curious to see how far they'll go with it. Is basically my thing, and I really hope that it stays Americans, not like Hydra or the Skrulls have taken over or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, me too. Totally. And I mean, I think like Winter Soldier, where Cap also goes against orders, and Civil War, where Cap also goes against orders.
Yeah.
And the first Avengers movie, even, he doesn't really, go. He's like, I'm going to go investigate this myself and go somewhere I'm not supposed to. Hey, you're making energy weapons.
Right.
But like, I mean, Nick Fury hired Batroc in the first Winter Soldier movie. Right. Like, so, it's not, I mean, and I wonder whether there's like anything there. That would be actually like really interesting. But, Shield had to go basically in Steve's words anyway. And then, they'd already started a TV show, so it couldn't really go,
right.
But like, it's like, the idea was like, yeah, it's Hydra, but it's like, it's also the system.
Yeah.
It's also this secret group that like people didn't know about then, right? Like it was a secret group that was surveilling like everyone like throughout the world and was like a US agency, except there was a World Security Council like running.
I mean, that's part of why I think this is so interesting is the MCU has for the most part fudged this idea of is it American or is it world? And so to now explicitly be talking about this, I'm really into. We're trying to keep this short, so I want to do 2 quick questions, and then we'll be out. Bucky, what's your take on like him looking for kind of redemption and healing for the trauma that he's caused to others, but also that he's carrying himself?
I love it. He's like not Loki, but like Loki, one of my favorite MCU characters. And he's just like the archetype, like the like assassin who doesn't want to be an assassin anymore. I don't know why. I just love that archetype. Yeah. And I super love the idea of, actually trying to make amends.
Yeah.
Right. And okay, so with the one thing with the senator, the idea of not breaking any laws is like, I don't care about laws. Right. But like, not really hurting people, but like trying to make things better and sort of, redeem yourself through action.
Yeah.
And, I wasn't crazy about the therapy scene, and I know you had some thoughts on it as well, but I love that there is a therapy scene.
Very much so.
And I'm very curious to see where that goes.
Yeah.
I think him befriending his victim's dad is like so touching, also a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
And like I feel like I'm like, oh, okay, you know, like I hope this goes well. I mean, it's a piece of fiction, so I don't see how it can. but
yeah.
like it's.
I think there's a couple of things there. One, I loved the therapy scene, but I want to save our discussion for that because I'm actually going to ask a number of my friends who are mental health professionals like what they thought of that and get some background there.
Sounds good.
But yes, I love that he's in therapy. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that, you know, when I studied therapy, both as a practitioner, but also I've been a part of it for a while, and I certainly had, you know, a lot of my own trauma and was not the great person for a while and hurt some people. And one thing I learned on both sides of that question is that when you're thinking to make amends, it's very important to ask, will this actually help the other person? Or am I going to basically like poke someone else's wound just so that I can feel better about myself, you know? And that some people don't want to hear an apology from you. They just want to not think about the person who hurt them. And my sense is that we're like I didn't think that and be like, oh, Bucky, you coward. Why didn't you tell the father? I was like, the father wants to know. It might also be much worse to know that it's this guy who's his friend now. I think the fact that the father wants to know is eventually going to be the deciding factor.
I agree.
But I like that. I like that it's not just reflexively, oh, tell him. It's figure out, is it going to be better for him to know, even if it's a terrible answer?
Yeah, because it's like, it's not Bucky like, oh, I've really got to get this off my chest and then I'll feel way better. Right. It's like, Bucky's like, okay, I'm going to make friends with this dude and try and kind of like, you know, help him out day to day a little bit here and there. Just like, you know, just like be a friend to, you know, someone who maybe is, you know, older and lonely and doesn't have any family left, you know.
So here's my last question.
Yeah.
Sam is now working for the government, clearly. It is officially known that he has these powers, or at least in the official way that he's doing it.
Right. Powers as in terms of like a fancy suit.
Right.
Like Iron Man type powers.
Right. But what I'm going to is the Sokovia Accords. And Sokovia Accords have established that tech counts as power. Which is a weird thing and kind of a fudge, but let me still ask the question. Yeah. I'm guessing that he got the same pardon that Bucky did and that they all did of like, look, you saved the world. We're fine. But I'm wondering, like, did Falcon sign the Accords? I'm guessing the show is not going to, because I feel like at this point the show only brings up the Accords when it's convenient. It ignores the fact that most of the shows and movies don't make sense if the Accords are still out there. But I'm curious, do you think Sam would have signed the Accords?
I think that's a really good question. And that kind of gets to the one point that it feels like we weren't going to touch that I wanted to touch on, which is like money struggles.
Yes.
Like, which we haven't seen in the MCU almost at all to this point, right? Whereas like in like the old school Spider-Man movies and stuff, like there was a lot about that, which like by and large I can do without too much about money struggles. But I think, you know, particularly when you have like, especially like a person of color, but anyone in the United States joining the military, so many people join the military partially because it's, you know, just economically, right? It's a job. It pays well. It's got security.
It'll pay for college. All these things.
Right. Exactly. And it feels like Sam is working with the Air Force, maybe partially, like for money. You know, like it's like, yeah, how do these people get by? Like, I mean, I kind of wonder, like, what's Bucky living on? Like, does he get Social Security? He is 106. Like, does he get back pay? You know, in terms of the pardon, though, like, so, I mean, Bucky killed a whole bunch of people that Falcon didn't, you know? So, for Sam, it's, like, maybe a little lower. Like, okay, you violated the Sokovia Accords, but, like, you weren't an assassin for a number of decades. But, yeah, I think it's a good question. Like, would he? I mean, honestly, like, I'm kind of disappointed that, like, Steve was like, here's the shield. You should be the next Captain America. And Steve's like, and Sam's like, nah, like, I'm just gonna give this to a museum. And, you know, he clearly, I think, got kind of conned by the government there. But, that makes me feel like, yeah, maybe he would have signed the Accords and just been like, all right, you know.
Right.
Or the U.S. government is like, we're going to use people who haven't signed the Accords to do shit that we're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And, you know, that would be like, that's more interesting to me.
And they can have that as a blackmail of him. Of like, you got to keep doing the missions or we're going to report that you've been doing this stuff without having signed the Accords. I mean,
Exactly. It could be sort of like a standoff.
And I am so glad you brought up the financial piece because I think that's important. And I think that it's interesting we haven't thought about it before. Like, it did seem that Tony was providing for the Avengers. Like, they were all kind of living at this compound and, like, you know, he was complaining about the coffee grounds, but I'm guessing Tony's paying all the grocery bills. But they weren't getting a salary. And there's a sort of like dimension of like, you know, I've seen some comments of like, why didn't Tony have in his will like every Avenger gets $1 billion? I've got lots of it. Why, you know, Falcon could go to Pepper Potts and get a loan of the money in any sensible world.
Right,
Clearly
for
he's
sure.
not going to. So yeah, there's so many great issues here. We want to keep this episode short, so I'm going to cut it off there. But Paul, thank you so much. Fans would love to hear from you. Let us know. Write in Facebook, Twitter. It's the Ethical Panda. You can also email us at theethicalpanda@gmail.com. You can also go to theethicalpanda.com, find all our contact information, or go to strandedpanda.com. There you'll find a lot of other great podcasts, including the MCU cast, where they're doing great content on these shows every week as well. Paul, if people want to find more about you, where can they do that?
Just Zen Madman. At Twitch is probably the place that I'm doing the most stuff right now, but you can hit me up on Twitter as well.
Awesome. Well, cool. Please check all that out. Love to know what you all think about these questions, and have a great day.